Hi there. Welcome to Cats in the City, by Sith Sense. I'm Johnny.
And I'm Pearl.
Together, we would like to share with you pieces of interesting knowledge that we find.
And that could be useful to you in the future.
Pearl, in our previous video, you said that our code wasn't very efficient. How can we improve our code?
To do that, we'll have to learn a new data type. It's one of the sequence data type, and it's called a list.
Lists are a useful data type in Python that allow us to store multiple items in a single variable. You can think of list like a container that is used to store many items. The items in a list are ordered, changeable, and allow duplicates. An example of a list in Python looks like this. List big cats equals to square bracket, tiger, lion, and leopard. Tiger, lion, and leopard are items in the list of big cats.
There are other built-in data types in Python that are used to store collections of data. We'll learn about them in future videos. However, I think that list is the most popular container type variable in Python.
Yes, I agree. Lists are very useful because of these specific characteristics. Firstly, it's ordered, hence the position of the items in the list is fixed, unless we deliberately change them. The position of the items are indexed, and we can refer to each item by their position.
Do take note that in Python, indexes are integers that start from 0, 1, 2, and so on. New programmers always make the mistake of counting indexes from 1. Hopefully, you don't make this mistake.
You can change the items in a list, you can move the item to a new position, you can add or insert new item into a list, you can remove an item from a list, you can do many things with a list.
You can store different types of items in a list, and these items can be of different data types. You can store strings, integers, and floating numbers in the same list. Moreover, the item doesn't have to be unique, you can have duplicates of the same items in a list. It's so convenient.
Indeed, list is very useful and we'll see it in action in this video. We'll also need to learn about Python loops in this video.
Loops are a way to repeat a certain task multiple times. In Python, when we said to loop through a list, it means to go through a list, item by item. When we loop through a list, we usually do something to the item, and then return to the beginning of the loop, and then go through the same process again for the next item in the list.
The process of looping through a list is called iterating, or iteration. But enough with the theories, let's do some coding.
We'll return to our notebook in Colab. Remember our BMI calculator? It's a function that divides a given weight W by the squared value of a given height h.
In this video, we'll be using lists and loops to calculate the BMI of our friends. We have 3 lists, one containing the names of our friends, one containing their weight in kilograms, and one containing their height in meters. The first list is a list containing the names of our friends, for example, Alice, Bob, Charlie, Diana, Elizabeth, and Frankie. The second list contains their weight in kilograms, and the third list contains their height in meters, like so. You should make sure that each item in these lists corresponds to one another in the correct order.
This means that Alice weighs 50 kilograms and is 1.65 meters tall.
Similarly, Bob is 70 kilograms and 1.7 meters tall. The same goes to our other friends in these lists.
We'll use a for loop to iterate over the items in these lists and calculate our friend's BMI. This is how we start a for loop. For I in range 6, remember to use a colon at the end of the sentence.
I here refers to the index of each of the items in our lists. You can actually use any variable name here, such as x or n, or you can even use a more descriptive name like index of each item.
Range is a built-in function in Python. A range of 6 will return 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Range by default returns a sequence of integers, starting from 0 and increments by 1.
The syntax for range is range, start, stop, and step, where start is an optional parameter that specifies the starting value, default is 0, stop is a required parameter that specifies the stopping value, and step is an optional parameter that specifies the step size. Default is 1.
Look at this 3 examples for range. Range of 5, 30, and 5 will generate a sequence that starts at 5, stops at 30 and increments by 5. It will return 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25.
A range of 1 and 8, on the other hand, will generate the sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. In other words, the sequence will start at 1 and stop at 8. By default, if you didn't specify the increment value, the sequence will increment by 1.
Be aware that the start value is included in the sequence, but the stop value is excluded from the sequence.
Yes, a lot of new programmers make this mistake too. It's actually quite logical if you think about it. A range of 6 is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Notice that 6 numbers are returned. And these numbers correspond directly with the index of any list that contains 6 items, such as ours.
Going back to our for loop, Colab automatically indents our second line. Remember that indentation is very important in Python, and since for loop is a block of code, you'll need to use indentation, but Colab already taken care of that for us.
In the second line, we call our BMI calculator function, and pass the weight and height variables as its parameters.
Weight square bracket I refers to the ith item in the weight list. Similarly, height square bracket I also refers to the ith item in the height list.
So, on the first iteration of our loop, I is equal to 0, so weight square bracket 0 is 50, and height square bracket 0 is 1.65. These are actually the weight and height for Alice.
Indeed, on the second iteration, I becomes 1, and so weight 1 is 70, and height 1 is 1.7, and these correspond to Bob's weight and height.
The BMI calculator function will do the calculation, and returns a BMI value to a new variable called x. However, if we code our loop like this, the BMI value will be replaced with a new BMI value in the next iteration. In the end of our loop, we'll have only one BMI value, and it belongs to Frankie.
Yes, we should save the BMI value in a new list, but to do that we'll need to create a new list before the loop. We'll create a new list called BMI. It's an empty list for now, later it'll be populated with BMI values calculated by our function. To create a new empty list called BMI, you just have to type BMI equals to an empty square bracket.
On the third line of our loop, we'll write BMI.append x. This code will add the value x, which is the BMI value calculated, to the list BMI.
Let's run our code now. It has run successfully, without any error.
Let's see what's in our list of BMI.
There, we have successfully calculated the BMI for all our friends. But what if new friends were added to our lists? There are 6 friends in our lists, hence we wrote range of 6. If our lists were to expand and included 10 friends, we'll have to manually change our code to range of 10.
We can automate that using the len function. Len is another built-in function in Python. It returns the length of something, and if we used it with our list, it will returns the length of our list, and that length is equal to the number of items in our list.
We can modify the first line of our code to this, for I in range of, len of names. We have automated the range of our loop. Now, the loop will iterate through all the items in our list, regardless of how many items were in the list.
Now we have 4 lists: names, weights, heights, and BMI. Even a new programmer would have no problem understanding these lists, but I would prefer that our code output something friendlier to non-programmer.
We can use the Python f strings. Its proper name is actually literal string interpolation. It's a very powerful string formatting mechanism.
Let's create another loop for this. For I in range of, len of names, y equals to f open quotation marks, curly bracket, names square bracket I, apostrophe s, weight is, curly bracket, weight square bracket I, kilogram comma, and height is, curly bracket, height square bracket I, meter dot, curly bracket, names square bracket I, has a BMI of, curly bracket, BMI square bracket I, and finally dot, and close quotation marks.
Wow! That's a mouthful. Notice that, to use F strings, you must start your string with the letter F. Your strings are enclosed in quotation marks. F strings allow you to include variables in your strings, and to do that, you use the curly bracket. We call this, embedding an expression inside string literals.
And finally, in the third and last line of our code, we print Y. You can run the code now.
The value for BMI has so many decimal points, it's so confusing.
Let me format it into something less confusing. I will change it to a 2 decimal points number, like this. It's very easy, and there are many other formats that can be used. After that, I'll run the code again.
Alice's weight is 50 kilograms, height is 1.65 meters. Alice has a BMI of 18.37. Bob's weight is 70 kilograms, height is 1.7 meters. Bob has a BMI of 24.22. And so on, and so forth, for Charlie, Diana, Elizabeth and Frankie.
Even though Charlie weighs the most at 85 kilograms, his BMI is normal because he is very tall. Frankie should try to lose some weight, his BMI is way too high.
Wait, I think there was a mistake with Elizabeth's and Frankie's heights. OMG. We have swapped their heights. Elizabeth's height should be 1.45 meters, while Frankie's should be 1.72 meters, instead. Now, let's recalculate their BMI.
I see, hopefully Frankie didn't hear what I've just said about him, ha ha ha.
I want to challenge our audience to write a new code, to calculate the BMI of our friends, output the calculation using print and F strings, but without using the BMI list.
In our example, we were given 3 lists. We created a 4th list to keep the value of the calculated BMI, and used the 4th list in the F strings. In this challenge, you can only use the 3 lists given, and you cannot create another list. As for the F strings, you can play around with the F strings and use your own sentences, change the order of variables in it, etc.
Tips: you only need 1 loop instead of 2. Can you do it?
That's all from us this time. I'm Johnny.
And I'm Pearl.
Bringing you bits and pieces of interesting knowledge from cats in the city.
Thanks and see you next time.